Welcome everybody, my name is Nairi and this channel is normally about adoption, fostering, childhood trauma, but today we're going to talk about teenagers and I'm going to do a series. You'll have to excuse me, it's really hot today. I'm going to do a series on teenagers and we're going to start with puberty and how to deal with that. So the first thing I want to say is I've got 2 adopted sons and I've also got 5 birth children who are now adults. So I've had a broad range of experiences and today I am just going to talk about my experiences, okay? So if you don't agree with me, I'm sorry, I apologise, but that's what I'm going to talk about. So the first thing to say is this video has come from a very kind lady who put some suggestions down for me. I'm really sorry I can't remember what your name is, but you were talking about, you'd watched a video of mine about adopting teenagers, and you said, oh, it's really sad that there aren't more videos on teenagers. So the videos I have on my channel at the moment are around adoption. So this is going to be relevant for adopters, foster carers, professionals, but also the public in general. Okay, so generally about teenagers and how to deal with the different stages. So being that we're dealing with puberty, let's get cracking about that. Now, looking back at my 5 adult children and my 2 adopted sons, the first thing that I want to say about puberty is you cannot actually predict when it's going to happen. You might think that based on the type of physique that your child has, their development, even their personality in a way, that you might be able to say, well, they're probably going to hit puberty earlier and they're probably not going to hit it earlier. And in my experience, that hasn't been the case. So obviously, if you have a girl that is developing, you might think it's going to happen earlier, but as I say, in my experience, it hasn't been the case, and sometimes I've been caught out. So that's the first advice I can give to you is be ready. Be ready for it to happen earlier than you're expecting. I guess the research probably says it happens earlier with girls than boys, but even then, you know, there could be exceptions to that rule. And I know that one of my daughters had, started menstruation much earlier than I expected, and actually she was much earlier than any of the other children. Okay, this is the same family, and these are my birth children, and she was much earlier than any of the other girls. And I ended up with 4 girls and a boy that were my birth children, and I've got 2 boys who adopted sons. So be ready for it. Okay, so don't leave those important conversations that you need to have, especially with girls, around menstruation and what that's going to be like, what that's going to feel like, what it means for them, you know, why they have it. Don't leave those important conversations to be had. I guess we need to then say as well, don't leave the important conversation about sex either with your children. I mean, it's really hard. I found it really hard with maybe my son to have that conversation, and the 2 sons I have now. Not so difficult with the girls, but you may find that it is really hard for you. But I just plead with you, I beg of you, before they hit comprehensive, which is the school that we have, you know, when they move up, I don't know what it'll be in your country, before they hit that time, please have the conversation with them. You don't have to go into massive detail, you don't have to cover everything in the first conversation, but I think they need to understand why their bodies are going to change, and what this is all about. You know, why do we grow certain areas on our body? Why do our bodies change? It's because we're becoming sexual beings, and if you don't tell them about sex, then how can they understand what on earth is happening to them? So if you need to sort of sit down and think about how you're going to explain it, how much detail, how you're going to put the words across. If you can't feel comfortable using certain words in the first instance, then fine, but don't skirt around it. Don't wait for them to find out all the information from their peers, because there's a lot of danger around that, which I guess I'm going to cover in another video. So I don't know if I mentioned this is going to be a series. Okay, so this is the first one in the series. That's the first thing about puberty. Do not wait before you start talking to them about these changes. Now, I don't know if you can remember when you started puberty and how it felt for you, but I can. I was really kind of not sure about how I felt about it. I was kind of excited that it looked like I was moving into adulthood, but I was also scared. Though those changes to the body are quite scary, and sometimes they can be a little bit embarrassing. I remember when I was younger not being particularly big chested in any way and getting teased by boys. And I remember boys being like very much more aware of what girls were like. Things were changing, as in when you were in the younger school and you were younger before you hit teens, it was very much you could have fun relationships with the opposite sex, you could run around, you could play games, and then things start to change. You'd start to notice each other's bodies more, and there's conversations around that. So I can remember it being quite a testing time, and maybe you can too. So there's something to be said for normalizing with them conversations about those body changes. So I'll talk about, the first one is about sex, just getting it out there what it is. The second one is normalizing conversations about those body changes. Now I would like to say that I would hope that my husband has said enough to the boys now. They're getting older, they're 15 and 16, but in the beginning it was a case of encouraging him to start having conversations about certain body changes that are going to happen in boys. Okay, so wet dreams and sort of pubic hair and all those sorts of things, and then how hygiene affects that, and how you need to change your approach to hygiene and being a lot more vigilant around that. And so that was his conversations, and for me it was conversations around how to deal around menstruation and the first bras and things like that. Again, you can't leave your children to have to second guess how they're going to deal with this. The girl's first bra, it might be that she's wanting to wear one even when she doesn't actually have those bodily changes very much there yet, and she doesn't really need one, but all of her friends have actually got bras, so she wants to get one. It might be that your son is worried that he's not having wet dreams, or that he is having wet dreams, or all these things. Like, talk about them, because the trouble in our country, I think, is that we very much leave it to the children's or teenagers' peers to guide them about what is right and wrong. And I'm sure you're aware of the influence of the internet not being positive all the time, and we're going to have a whole video on the internet, maybe more than one, about how that changes people's perspective about what is normal. And you want your children to have a healthy outlook on their puberty, on their development, and what it means and what it's for. You don't want that to be guided for you by their peers who may be watching stuff on the internet which isn't healthy, and then maybe what they want to persuade that to your teenager that that's what's normal. So if you can have those conversations, it means that if your child wants to talk to you, if your teen wants to talk to you, they may well not, okay, but they can, because you've already broached that subject with them. The other thing to say about puberty, which I'm sure if any of you are going through it at the moment, is you might find that your child or teen has rages inexplicably. Now, you can't put everything down to hormones. In our experience, we've had situations where perhaps we should have held back because it clearly was a hormonal thing, and then situations where we needed to tighten up because we were being disrespected, we weren't being listened to. The trick of this is really hard, because if you come in too hard with a teenager and you start disallowing things, being argumentative with them, not accepting sometimes that you need to pick your battles, and you're trying to tighten in with them because you can see that they're changing and you're not entirely sure that you like some of the way they're changing. If you restrict too hard, then you will get a fight back. You will get the opposite situation probably. They'll want to do more. And it may be now that if you really look at it, the things they're trying to do and say are not that damaging. But if you kind of restrict everything, then it could be that they will seek out more risky behaviours, more damaging behaviours. Now, being that this is an adoption channel, I'm going to just put in here now that you probably know as an adopter that they are more vulnerable, some of our children, to carrying out risky behaviours and following others and copying others. So yes, you do have to be aware of what's going on and keep your eyes and ears open to check what's going on. But in the main, from my experience, I think about the fact, because we're a Christian family as well. Somebody come in, and now I've lost my train of thought. So when you restrict, yes, I'm saying we're a Christian family, so obviously we had certain standards, that certain things that we didn't want our children to get into, and we just, encourage them to come to church with us and stuff like that. That's fine. But I look back and I think because of that, we were probably more susceptible to guiding them away from certain experiences, which I honestly think sometimes teenagers need to have. Okay, teenagers need to experiment a little bit, and you might be like, you may have an 11-year-old now and you're like, oh no, please don't tell me maybe they need to try alcohol, liquor, whatever you call it. Maybe they need to try a little bit of a smoke, a little bit of vape. I mean, you don't want them to, okay? But the chances are at some time they're going to do it anyway. So you teach them what you think is right, you show them what you think is right, but you allow a little bit of a leeway for them to try to grow up and make their own decisions. Because if you make every decision for them and you restrict them from going out, you restrict them from doing things with friends, then you will pay the price for that, in my opinion, because it's going to happen anyway for most of them. For most of them, they're going to try out certain things anyway, and if they don't do it when they're teenagers, they're going to do it when they're adults, and it may be a whole lot worse. Now, I think about my children, not all of them have done that. Some of them have got different personalities, but for some of them it was necessary to do that, and it needed to happen. So that's my advice to you, is just be careful that you don't over restrict. Now, getting back to these hormones and these moods and these flying off the handles, that is going to happen. Now, in our house at the moment, we have adopted sons. We have one that flies off the handle very, very easily. But I look back over my other children, and at times it's been the case where things have escalated, and instead of playing it cool and trying to de-escalate, maybe we've had that argument, maybe we've tried to force that outcome, and it's just got a whole lot worse. Okay, so it is a case of picking your battles. What is it you're arguing over? Is it that you have a bit of a personality clash with your teenager? Maybe your partner doesn't, or is it that it really is something serious and it needs, you need to lay the cards on the table and say, no, that's not happening. Really analyze it. Is it worth the battle? Because if it's not worth the battle, there are going to be plenty more, and all you will do is alienate your teenager, and they just won't want to come and talk to you about anything. Of course, they'll go off and speak to their peers, won't they? They'll go off and speak to the peers. Now, the bottom line still is you're still the adult. So let's just go down the other route now. You are still the adult, and what we see now is perhaps a generation that don't really respect adult authority. I mean, not everybody, of course not everybody. They don't respect that adults may have a view on things. So it's still up to you to be the adult and not feel that you can't do that. I think if you have a difficult personality in a family and someone who's very argumentative with you, who wants to have their own way all the time, it's going to be much, much more likely that you do not want to challenge that teenager. Now, sometimes that might be fine, but if you continue to do that, and if you've been like that with them as a child, you will find that they will dictate everything to you. And as they come into adulthood, they're going to think that's the norm. That they can tell an employer what to do. They can tell someone in a relationship what to do. That they can have their own way. So you still have to be strong enough to say, this is important to our family. I don't know what example you might want to give. In our family, we don't curse or use bad language. I mean, the odd one might pop out, but it's not something we do as a regular thing. So if they were picking that up from school and bringing it into the home and suddenly came out with the F word or whatever, it might be that we don't go, crazy about that, but we would be like, no, we don't do that in this family. We don't curse in this family. We don't use bad language. So don't bring it into the home, because that's not what we do, and we're not going to accept that. And I think that's fair enough. In our family, we always sit down to eat a meal if we're there. So if we're all around in the house, so we sit down together to eat a meal. I think that's what we do, and I think that's fair enough. So if one of our teenagers was like, couldn't be bothered to come home for a meal and just wanted to stay out on the streets with friends, then we wouldn't let that happen. They either go out before the meal or they go out after the meal, but they're here with us so that we can catch up for the day. So those are just simple things that we do as a family. You might think, well, that's a bit crazy. Like, we never sit down for a meal. That's not important to us. Well, that's fine. If that's not important to you, then that's not part of the fabric of your family. Then you don't need to try and enforce that. But I'm trying to give you examples of things that in the family, you may decide that you want your teenager to abide by, and it's not movable. Okay, it's not movable. Now, as my boys get older, they're 15 and 16 now, and they've got maybe longer college days or jobs and stuff like that, or they've got girlfriends or whatever, it may be that we move that. And we say, well, no, you don't need to come home for a meal every night. If you're out with your friends, it's fine, you're older, but we want to know. Okay, we don't want you to just not turn up. So things move as they grow into adulthood. Of course they do, because you are moving toward independence. And another thing to recognise about sort of puberty and independence and sexuality as they are going toward adulthood, that's what we're aiming for. So let's get back to puberty, because I think I might have just kind of gone off on a bit of one there. Sexuality. So we told them about sex, but then puberty is developing, you know, sexual habits, sexual nature, sexual interests, and this can be so distressing for teenagers. And I want to bring in again, obviously, the influence of the internet and their understanding of sex and sexuality, which is why I said to you, make sure that you start speaking to them about things. It's very difficult for our teenagers to know what they want, because they will have pressures from all angles. Peers will be talking about the first time they've had sex. They will be seeing sexual things on the internet, more than likely. You might try and guide them away from that, but at some point they're going to see it and they're going to hear it. And they may be confused about their sexuality. They may be attracted to both sex. They may be attracted to their own sex, or they may be attracted to the opposite sex and they're not being reciprocated to that. So they've got all of this minefield to tread. They've got their bodies changing and they've got this minefield to tread through. Are they attractive? Do people find them sexually attractive? If not, why not? You know, maybe they start having girlfriends and boyfriends, and then you get the inevitable breakups that happen. And looking back again with my children, some of those breakups have been very damaging, even at a young age. So if they've had quite a serious relationship, not necessarily highly sexual, but someone they've really liked, that person has broken up with them and gone with someone else, it's been very, very damaging to the confidence. And I can think of 3 of my children out of the 7 where that's really, really, actually 4 anyway, quite a few of them where it's left its mark, and it's left a kind of confidence, massive confidence dip and doubt about themselves, their own sexuality, their own worth. Massive. So it's important to be there for the fallout, and it's important to be there through the relationships, guiding them through. So if you found that they, as you know, their bodies develop and they're wanting to go out with people and they're starting to get more sexually inclined, then you need to be having conversations about how are they being treated. Are they sexually active yet? How is that other person treating them? They've been treating respect. Are they looking after their bodies? If they are having sex, what protection's being used? If they're not having sex, then are they able to control what they want to happen? Not every teenager of 14, 15 wants to have sex. I think everybody thinks they do, but the reality is there's pressure there to do it, and a lot of them don't want to do it. So are they being pressured into it? All these conversations have to happen, because this is why your teenagers become withdrawn, angry, confused, non-compliant with you, struggle with school. They are now being asked to do things at school, have exams at the worst possible time in their lives, when they've either just hit puberty in the last couple of years, or they're hitting it, and they've got all the serious stuff at school happening as well. It's no wonder that sometimes our teenagers' brains are ready to just, because all that pressure is waiting upon them. And if you are an adopter or foster carer, you've not only got that, but you've got your early childhood trauma kicking into action, triggering memories being reignited by things happening. If there have been sexual issues with your adopted child or foster child and they're hitting puberty now, then you can be reassured that things are just going to start coming back to the fore for them, because they're suddenly understanding maybe what's happened to them in the past in a way that they never understood before they were sexually aware. So I hope that gives you a little taste into puberty. As I say, this is a series. I don't know what the next one will be, but I will try and hit on as much as I possibly can in the series that I've experienced, and I hope you find it helpful. If you do, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you soon on Fly Little Birds. Thank you.